Well, for more on the Pope's Christmas address, we can cross now to France 24's Rome correspondent Seema Gupta. Now, Seema, as expected, the Pope did include Ukraine in his remarks. He again called for an end to the war there and keeping that focus on the human toll of the conflict. Is this his most forceful denouncement of the war?
Clearly, it was a very strong message. I mean, he has really put Ukraine on the front and center in terms of the suffering that he has seen happen there as a result of the invasion of the country 10 months ago, as he mentioned. He said that he hoped that in this period of Christmas, that it was necessary for people to overcome the spiritual drowsiness and the shallow holiday glitter, talking about how instead they could look at the situation in Ukraine and come up with, as we heard him mention, concrete gestures of solidarity and hoping that those in positions of power can stop this senseless war. He talked in general about a famine of peace in the world and how it was a situation, as he put it, of a third world war. Now, touching specifically on Ukraine, but he also mentioned several hot spots in the world. But clearly, that was on top of the agenda. We saw here in the square there were some representatives, if you like, of Ukrainians carrying the flags, wanting that prayer for peace as well for their own country.
Now, Seema, as you mentioned, of course, the war in Ukraine was topping the agenda. But what were other of the Pope's big messages from his Christmas address this year?
Well, he touched on a lot of different countries that he's mentioned in previous Urbi et Orbi and previous addresses. For instance, Syria, hoping that while it seems to have receded in terms of people's consciousness, the situation and the violence there is not over. He touched on the Holy Land, Israel, citing the recent violence and confrontations that we've seen in that country and hoping that there will be a move towards peace there, as well as Lebanon, another Middle Eastern hotspot. He's hoping that they will get the help they need in order to rebound. And then he turned his attention to the Sahel region as well as Yemen, talking about conflicts there and how he hoped that there would be peace there and calling for reconciliation in countries like Myanmar as well as Iran. And then he turned his attention to the Americas, but highlighting in particular the situation for the people of Haiti, hoping that there would be a calming in the political tensions that are happening in that country. And as you mentioned, he even talked about food waste, remembering, of course, that Ukraine as a country was the world's breadbasket and how the war there is having an effect on hunger in countries like Afghanistan and in the region of the Horn of Africa. So really, that was the general issue about peace. But he also talked about regular families having to deal with the economic crisis, inflation, brought about in part by the war, dealing with unemployment, hoping that some prayer and hope would be generated for the new year. And of course, we often hear him talking about those marginalized, displaced people. He touched on the migrants as well as the poor, people in prisons, and even the elderly, often forgotten. And he called on people to remember them in this Christmas period.